I think the biggest contrast really was that Democrats were so prepared for this and Republicans were totally unprepared. I mean, they walked in and they didn't really seem to care about the facts of the case. It was just going to be a rambling defense. It really, in some ways, is like, I already know I got an A, so I don't need to study. Day one was just about settling one question, which is, does the Senate have basically the constitutional authority to impeach or convict a former president, now former president? And you saw Democrats, I think, lay out a painstaking case, drawing to the sort of the logical conclusion of if you couldn't impeach a former president, that would create, in their words, quote, the January exception.
Their argument is that if you commit an impeachable offense in your last few weeks in office, you do it with constitutional impunity. You get away with it.
Republicans came up to the plate and really just sort of maundered. It was just talking in circles. It was a very bizarre presentation, actually.
We still know what records are, right? On the thing you put the needle down on and you play it. Nebraska, you're going to hear, is quite a judicial thinking place. I worked in this building 40 years ago. I got lost then, and I still do.
And they really didn't get to the legal matter of it. And I think they just kind of left the question unaddressed. And yet still, you had 44 Republicans vote that you could not even hold this trial, basically, that it'd be unconstitutional to convict someone who's now out of office. And I think that just kind of skirts the real question. I mean, if you have 44 right at the top of the start of this whole thing who say, well, this is just an unconstitutional question regardless, they don't actually have to really even listen to the rest of the question, because they're basically saying
that I think it's beyond the Senate's constitutional authority to have an impeachment proceeding, the point of which is to convict and remove from office a man who left office 3 weeks ago.
Day two, I think, was a pretty brutal day for a lot of people on Capitol Hill. A lot of people who had lived through that attack, senators included. And I think it was pretty emotional to see, I think it's tough for a lot of senators to see their place of work. It's really a sacred place, just sort of desecrated.
They're leaving. They're leaving. They're leaving.
We kind of expected to see some of this new security footage that we hadn't seen before, and that was interesting to see. We saw that some of the first people through into the Senate, into basically the Capitol, were armed. We saw sort of a bombshell, that very famous photo of that man kicking his legs up on Nancy Pelosi's desk. Well, it turns out he has a very powerful stun gun, basically, almost a cattle prod. So these people were armed. They weren't just there to make a peaceful demonstration. They certainly were ready for a violent encounter. And I think that comes through. I think people are finally, once again, realizing how close of a call this was, that it was actually a lot more likely that it ended with maybe a member dying or a senator dying.
Is this the city? Where the fuck are they?
I think a lot of senators, even the most hardened Republican of them all, they were sort of moved by this whole thing. But the problem, I guess, is that they all came out saying, some of them almost teary-eyed, but everyone's emotional, everyone's angry about this attack, but they very quickly moved to, well, I don't know if I have the constitutional authority to do anything about it, or, let the courts and the legal system take care of these rioters. I don't know what President Trump has to do with it. And they're really ignoring the central case. All along, you basically had 45 Republicans who are there for President Trump, who are not going to vote to convict him. We're not looking in the universe of where they're going to really convict him. We're looking at whether or not they can pick off more than one or two.